In this episode, we talk about the accused in the Nithari killings being acquitted by the Allahabad High Court. We also talk about the latest developments in the India-Canada tensions. But first, we talk about why the latest survey showing a decrease in unemployment is not necessarily good news. Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. Last week, the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation released the results of the periodic labour force survey. This was for the period July 2022 to June 2023.
Yeah, so the periodic labour force survey, it was started in 2017-18.
That's Indian Express's Udit Misra, who writes on the economy for the paper.
And it follows up on the old practice that we had of having employment-unemployment surveys, which used to happen once in every 5 years. The PLFS happens every year, and so it gives us better data. And essentially, the idea behind a PLFS is that it provides policymakers with the understanding of what's happening to our labor force, whether more people are working, what sectors are they working in, how much are they earning in different categories of work. So it provides a good understanding for policymakers to then figure out whether the labor force is improving in line with the overall economy or what areas might require some kind of attention.
Yeah, because unless policymakers know how many people are unemployed and where, how will they be able to identify jobs for them, right?
Yes. I mean, it is a matter of concern for a while now that India's growth does not create as many jobs. And this is partly also the fact that our societies, our economies are becoming more and more dependent on technology, and that tends to often replace a lot of labor. And so if the labor is not skilled enough, then, you may see a scenario where the economy continues to grow in GDP terms, but not the pro rata increase in jobs may not happen. And that may then have its own effect on the society in terms of inequality or unrest of different kinds.
And Udit, before we talk about the results of this survey, could you just talk about how it is conducted? What exactly are people asked?
Yeah, so the survey is conducted, again, it's something that carries on right through the year, and different types of questions are asked. So, for example, a simple thing is recall period. When a surveyor goes, what kind of questions do they ask in terms of your employment? So, they could ask you about what was your employment status over the last whole year. They could ask you about what happened to your employment status in the last week or the last month. So, depending on what recall period they choose, they actually get data on different recall periods. Typically, the current weekly status, which is basically saying what happened to your employment in the last week, is the most robust one, or increasingly being considered to be the most robust one, because one tends to recall that status better at a national level. So those kind of things, and what's happening to gender aspects, what's happening to the sectoral composition, how many are working in agriculture, people moving into manufacturing, moving away from agriculture, what is happening? So all those questions are asked.
Right, and now let's talk about the results of this survey, because there seems to be good news, or at least that's what people are saying. Now, one of the metrics that is obviously talked about a lot is the unemployment rate. Basically, the proportion of people that demanded work but didn't get it this past year. So, for example, if 2 out of 100 didn't get it, then the rate would be 2%?
Yes, 2 out of 100 people who demanded work. It's not the whole population. So it is very crucial to understand unemployment rate is calculated over the population which is demanding work. So 2 of the 100 people who demanded work, if they did not get it, then that 2% would be the unemployment rate. And on the face of it, unemployment rate has again come down to 5.1% in the latest data. And it has actually been coming down over the last 2-3 years.
And Udit, is 5.1% a lot?
So on the face of it, a 5.1 number is decidedly lower than last year. And if you go back 6 years ago or even 5 years ago, it is decidedly lower than that, almost 2-3 percentage points lower. So in that sense, it's a welcome news to hear that, unemployment rate has come down sharply over the last 3, 4, 5 years.
Okay, now let's talk about the other metric, the labor force participation rate. Basically, the proportion of the population that is demanding work. Tell us, why is this metric important and what does the survey say about it?
Yeah, so the labor force participation rate is essentially that population which is demanding work, those 100 people, in a manner of speaking, whether those 100 people remain 100 or they become 120 and they're above, that way. And the labor force participation rate is also showing that it's been growing over the last 3-4 years. In fact, if you go back all the way to 6 years ago, that is the first labor PLFS survey, you'll find that number continuously going up. And which again, on the face of it, is a positive news that more and more people are joining the labor force, demanding work, which is in line with, population trends and which would be in line with a growing economy.
Okay, so this appears to be great news. The unemployment rate has come down, the labor force participation is increasing. But since you've mentioned on the face of it twice now, one assumes that there's a but coming.
Yes, the but comes because when you look at the economy, you don't go by just one metric if you really want to understand it. The details of the labor market data need to be read in the overall context and the details of the data. For example, the unemployment rate in 2020-21, that is the year when the pandemic hit us, our economy went into a technical recession. For 2 quarters, we did not grow. The whole country was more or less shut down for almost 6 months or more than that. And in that particular year, the unemployment rate in India fell, and it fell quite sharply. It was 7.5 and it had fallen from 8.8 in the year before. The year before, the economy had grown by just 4% and it was 8.8. Then in the COVID year, the economy actually went into a recession. It contracted by almost 6% and yet the unemployment rate fell.
Right. During the pandemic, so many people lost their jobs. So this is quite puzzling. How is it that the unemployment rate fell during this period? Were people not demanding as many jobs during that time?
So this is the thing that, it's not as if, when we look at the labor force participation rate, that doesn't show up. The people demanding jobs, that ratio also went up. So the question is, you have to then look at where are these jobs getting created, right? And that is where, sort of had a caveat when I was mentioning that this is all good news, because when we look at the details of the survey and try to look at what kind of jobs are getting created, who's joining them, how much are they paying, then the news is far more sobering.
Right. So tell us more about it. What is the footnote below this asterisk?
Now, the first thing that we look when we look at the details of the data is that the reason why the labor force participation rate is going up, the key reason is that more and more women are joining the workforce. They are demanding more and more jobs.
Which, again, on the face of it, is a good thing.
That is true. That is a good thing that more and more women are joining the workforce or demanding jobs. But then you look at where are these women working? There are typically 3 categories in which the PLFS categorizes all kind of work. There is a regular salaried wage work that all of us do. We go to offices or we go to a particular place and do our job and we get a wage. Then there is casual labor, which is that, construction worker or a Manrega worker, you work in a construction building and provide your labor. That is casual labor. And the third is self-employment. Now, self-employment has, a very unique category. It is about saying that I'll be running my own household enterprise, maybe, and it could be anything. It could be a roadside enterprise. It could be something coming out of home. You maybe cook food or, deliver something or that kind of a thing. We find that of the 3 categories, the jobs that are increasing are in the self-employment category. Now, again, one could question that, it really doesn't matter what category the jobs go up as long as the jobs go up. But here is the difference. In a growing economy, jobs are offered by businesses, and that typically creates jobs of regular wage or even casual labor.
Right, people get regular salaries.
Exactly, that proportion goes up. So you would imagine that if the economy is going up, economy is doing very well, then more and more these jobs must be coming in the regular wage category. But what we are seeing is that number has been actually seeing a secular decline, right? And the only number in which there has been a secular increase is the self-employment category, which is to say that, perhaps the economy is not doing as well and people are getting fired from their jobs or not finding jobs. And because they are distressed, they go for self-employment because they have to buttress their incomes. And the other thing that you look at in this is how much do these different job categories pay? And we find that again, the data shows over the last 6 years that it's been largely stagnant. The last 6 years have seen massive increase in prices. Inflation has been a massive worry. And yet, if you look across the category, self-employment, casual wage, casual labor or regular wage, all of that shows that the monthly earnings have been stagnant. So it basically shows that the most of the new jobs that are getting created are with women joining the workforce out of distress because their earnings are not enough. And they're typically joining in the self-employment category. It is not to do with a booming economy, which is creating new kinds of jobs and providing regular wage to everybody. So that's the sobering part of the story.
And Udit, does that also mean that people are earning less than they used to?
So it may not be that the people are earning less in terms of nominal wages, which is to say that in everyday terms, you may see that the number is higher than what it was 5 years ago or 6 years ago. But in real terms, when you take away the effect of inflation, then the earnings would have fallen because the increase is not in line with the inflation. So, the salaries have not gone up or the monthly earnings have not shot up as high as they would have if they were in line with the inflation.
So, for example, somebody getting 100 rupees in 2014, they might still be getting 100 rupees, but the value of that 100 rupees has considerably gone down.
Yeah, something to that effect that, the same amount of money or maybe a marginal improvement in that income is not commensurate in real terms to keep up with the inflation. So you're actually worse off. And that is forcing actually more and more people in the household, which are typically women, to come into the labor force to ask for work. And when they do not get work, they get into the self-employment category. So they're trying everything. So this is what is showing distress. This is how you can read distress in the labor data. So on the face of it, everything looks rosy because all the major metrics are trending in the right direction. But the details of it suggest that there is considerable distress and that people are working not because they're doing really well or the economy is actually providing them jobs. They are trying everything in their power by being self-employed to gain more money. So that's the sobering bit of the story.
And next we talk about the Nithari killings. Last week, Moninder Singh Pandher, who was arrested in 2006 for the Nithari killings, walked out of prison in Noida after the Allahabad High Court acquitted him and his house help Surinder Kohli in the case. Both of them were accused of abducting and raping children and women from the nearby villages of Nithari, committing acts of cannibalism and disposing of their bodies in a drain in the locality. When we spoke to Indian Express's Dheeraj Mishra, he told us that the Nithari killings are one of the most horrific incidents the country has ever witnessed.
A number of children, mostly they were minors, they were murdered in a very, very brutal way, and their body remains, they were scattered. They were found out from a house number D5 in Sector 31 that is just attached to a village Nithari in Noida.
This was back in 2005. When, over a span of 5 to 6 months, a number of children from Noida Sector 31 started disappearing.
A number of people started complaining. They reached out to police. But, initially, as I talked to some of the victim families also, they said that when they first reached out to the police, they denied registering any case.
The police assured the families that they would help them find the children, but did not register cases. Eventually, one of the families of the victims reached out to the court.
And he filed application in the court to the magistrate court that such thing has happened and police is not registering FIR. Please order to register an FIR in the case.
When the police finally registered an FIR and started investigating the case, Dheeraj says that that's when they first got hold of Surinder Kohli. And this happened because of a missing mobile phone.
There was also a complaint of missing mobile phone. So police arrested a person for a mobile phone and he told the police that Surinder Kohli gave him that phone. And that is how police reached out to the Surinder Kohli, and that particular mobile phone belonged to the one of the missing girl. So that is how police got hold of Surinder Kohli. And then they asked him to come to the police station and then they interrogated him for a longer period of time. And then Surinder Kohli and Moninder Singh Pandher, who is the house owner of D5. So both of them were arrested on 29 December 2006. And that is how the case started unfolding.
Now, Dheeraj says that after the arrest, a drain near the D5 house was cleared and a corridor behind the house was meticulously excavated. D5, of course, was owned by Moninder Singh Pandher. And the murders had first come to light when human remains were first found in this drain.
It was a huge number of media, a lot of political people, also Human Rights Commission, all of these people reached to the Sector 31 in Nithari village, and there was a dredging of that nala that flows in front of the house D5, and there is a corridor just behind to the D5 where it is alleged that the body remains of these missing children were found from these two places.
And while this corridor was being cleared, Surinder Kohli had allegedly accepted that he had abducted those children and had raped and murdered them. And so it was on the basis of these statements that Kohli and Pandher were convicted and given death sentences. However, as we mentioned before, earlier this month, the Allahabad High Court acquitted them of all charges. And this is because the court did not find any proof that ties these two people with the murdered children.
I mean, it is just on the basis of statement of a accused. CBI made a whole case that it was a murder of series of people and rape and everything that happened inside that house. But court is saying that there is no evidence to prove that except the statement of the accused.
The court also raised questions about the investigation methods employed by the police, such as administering the truth serum to obtain statements from the accused.
I just want to quote a particular para of judgment of the High Court. It is saying that the investigation is botched up and basic norms of the collecting evidences have been brazenly violated. It appears to us that the investigation opted for the easy course of implicating a poor servant of the house by demonizing him without taking due care of probing more serious aspect of possible involvement of the organized activity of organ trading.
Now, the High Court mentioned organ trading because just next to the D5 house was another house whose owner was arrested for organ trading.
He was arrested, I think, around in 1997. So court has made it completely clear that, why the CBI did not investigate it on this angle, organ trading. I mean, maybe it would have been a part of very big cartel. I mean, they would have been involved in these organ trading activities. And why it was solely on the basis of a statement of accused that they made this big case, and Kohli was convicted in 13 cases for the death sentence.
12 of which he has now been acquitted in. The one remaining case had gone all the way to the Supreme Court, but was later changed to life imprisonment.
So now he has been cleared in 12 cases, but that one particular case remains, where he has been convicted for the life imprisonment now. And Mr. Moninder Singh Pandher, he was awarded death sentence in 2 cases, and now he has also been cleared. So he will come out of the jail, Moninder Singh Pandher, but as of now, Surinder Kohli will remain in the jail.
Dheeraj says that in cases like these, the forensic investigation plays a major role in connecting an accused with the victims. But the court pointed out the CBI's failure to do that.
So in this case, as it was alleged that he used to murder the children, the girls in the kitchen. So the court is saying that CBI didn't found anything except some blood remains in some clothes of, I think, Surinder Kohli. So CBI couldn't prove that blood spot belonged to which person. So there were clothes, there were body remains, skull, a number of bones. These things were found out from the drain and corridor, both the places. And the victim families also identified the clothes of their children. But the issue here is that CBI couldn't prove that these things were actually done by these two accused. Also, the body parts were not recovered from inside the house. That is also, the court is saying that, that is also raises a big doubt that whether other people or the member of other group were involved in this issue or not. So that is what the court is saying.
Now, this decision by the court came as a big shock to the victims' families. And here, Dheeraj tells us what the families told him when he visited Nithari after the verdict was delivered.
See, most of the families, they have already left that Nithari village. Only 3 families are living in the Nithari village, and I met all the 3 families. I mean, they are very, very disappointed their side. And also, if you think on the, at a society at large, a lot of people are questioning that what actually happened to those children, especially most of them were minor girls. So what happened to them? Who is actually responsible for these killings? So we do not know answer yet. One of the victim's mother, she does ironing just in front of the D5 house. And she's still doing that. And she's living in the area for last 35, 36 years. So she's saying that nothing changed, I mean, we spent a lot of our personal money also. We went to the court number of times. We supported CBI, every officials, whosoever called us, wherever we went to that place.
But despite all that, the feeling is that it did not amount to much. And even after all this time, questions still remain unanswered.
It is like, so everything that happened around 15, 16 years back, and after the arrest of these 2 people, they thought that, the agencies actually got hold of the people who were responsible for this killing. And they were somewhat satisfied after the conviction of both of them. But now they are again questioning, the authority. Of course, I mean, it is natural that they are questioning the court that how can they release these 2 people? How can they clear them of all the charges? But yes, I mean, so everything comes up to the investigation. As the court is saying that it doesn't matter how horrific the incident was. You cannot arrest, you cannot convict the people who is not responsible for that crime.
And next we talk about the India-Canada tensions. Last week, Canada announced that it will be withdrawing 41 diplomats from India and will be halting its visa and consular services in Chandigarh, Mumbai and Bengaluru. According to the country's Foreign Minister Melanie Joly, consular services will now only be available at the Canadian High Commission in New Delhi. The Canadian government's latest decision points to the already fraught India-Canada ties taking a turn for the worse. The tensions first came to the fore last month when Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, in his parliament, alleged the potential involvement of Indian agents in the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Khalistani extremist and a Canadian citizen. In this segment, Indian Express's Divya A joins my colleague Rahel Philipose to talk about the Canadian government's decision, its repercussions, and India's response.
So Divya, can you begin by explaining why the Canadian government has now decided to withdraw 41 of their diplomats from India?
So Canada on Friday announced that they are removing 41 diplomats and 42 of their dependent family members from India. So after Canada has accused India of having hand in the killing of Nijjar in the parliament and expelled one of India's diplomats from Canada. India had in return sought diplomatic parity with Canada. And since Canada has a huge diplomatic presence in India as compared to Indian diplomatic presence in Canada, so in that regard, India had asked Canada to kind of have equal number of diplomatic staff on both sides. This was just a measure to make India's strong position felt. India had conveyed to Canada that, Canadian diplomats are interfering in India's internal affairs. And in that context, India had said that since Canada has a huge presence in India, about 60 diplomatic staff in New Delhi compared to just 20 of Indian diplomatic staff in Ottawa. So India had sought that, there should be equal number of diplomatic officials on both sides. So in that context, talks were on for some time, as we learn, as the Ministry of External Affairs also stated on Friday in the wake of this development. And thereby, in this regard, finally, 41 Canadian diplomats and their family members were, evacuated from India, they departed from India. In fact, announcing this, Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly had also said that India's decision will impact the levels of services of consulates in both countries. In keeping with that, Canada halted visa services at their consulates in Chandigarh, Mumbai, and in Bangalore. And now the visa services and consular assistance is only available at the Canadian High Commission in Delhi.
And we understand that Canada has also called this action by India arbitrary. So tell us how both countries have been viewing this latest update.
So Canada portrayed that this is an arbitrary and overnight decision. They said that, this is against the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, and they also cited the convention in their favor. But the Ministry of External Affairs also hit back strongly on that, and they said that the state of our bilateral relations and the much higher number of Canadian diplomats in India and their continued interference in our internal affairs warranted a parity in mutual diplomatic presence. They also said that they have been engaged with the Canadian side on this over the last 1 month, and there was nothing arbitrary or overnight about this. And also, they said that their action is fully consistent with the Vienna Convention. The convention says that in the absence of specific agreement on to the size, with regards to the size of the mission, the receiving state may require that the size of the mission be kept within limits considered by it to be reasonable and normal. The receiving state in this case is India. So it was within India's purview to kind of set a limit to the number of diplomats, that Canadian diplomats that it could have in India.
Right. And Divya, could you tell us about the possible impact of this decision?
Yeah, this is going to have a huge impact in the days to come. In fact, the impact of this will unravel in the coming months, just ahead of the winter academic session, because a lot of Indian students apply to go to Canada to study in Canada, and their visas were pending. In fact, estimate says that more than 20,000 visas were pending. In fact, in this month only. But the overall overarching impact of this, I think we will be able to assess in the coming months, maybe by December. But as of now, it seems like that there is going to be huge slowdown and delays in immigration visa processing. In fact, Canada offers visas for Indian citizens in 7 categories, besides tourism visa, which is commonly used by people for visiting family and friends or for holiday, and the study permit. There is also a super visa, a multiple entry visa that enables parents or grandparents of Canadian citizens or permanent residents to visit Canada for up to 2 years at a time. So all these things are going to be impacted. In fact, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also, within a few hours of this development of his government announcing the departure of Canadian diplomats from India, he also commented on this aspect. He said that the Indian government's crackdown on Canadian diplomats was making normal life difficult for millions of people in both countries. He also said that the Indian government is making it unbelievably difficult for life as usual to continue for these people, and they are doing it by contravening a very basic principle of diplomacy. He said that this is something which has him very concerned for the well-being and happiness of millions of Canadians who trace their origins to the Indian subcontinent.
And could you tell us if this will impact India adversely? Because, according to Canadian statistics, last year, India was the top country from where students and workers moved to Canada.
Yeah, the cut in visa services is going to, lead to a significant impact on the Indian side because, India was the top country as per Canadian statistics for permanent residents, for temporary foreign workers and international students in Canada. And, this diplomatic staff, the cut down, the downsizing has happened, in fact, in the visa processing unit. The number of staff from the Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada, the agency which processes visas, was 27 in India, which is now down to 5. So one could expect that there is going to be a huge spillover effect. But even in this regard, the Indian side clarified that, they have sought diplomatic parity in the representations in the respective missions in Ottawa and New Delhi. And this should have had no impact on Canadian diplomatic strength in their consulates in Bengaluru, Mumbai and Chandigarh. They say that the Canadian decision to cease operations of their 3 consulates in India is unilateral and it is not related to the implementation of parity.
You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Rahel, Philipose and me, Shashank Bhargava. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.